back to Bagare, and in this video we'll be covering the concept of arrays. When I first came across this topic, I was very confused, but in this video we'll be solving that problem. So before we carry on, please don't forget to do this. Alright, so what are arrays? So arrays is when you have lots and lots of similar types of data and you want to store them in one place. So previously, say we had a program where we needed to store like the marks for 3 students. What we needed to do is say int mark 1 equals to 32, and then int mark 2 equals to 40, and then int mark 3 equals to 50. Right? So these are just marks out of 50, right? But now, yeah, because this is just a small program, this will do the trick and just solve this problem. But if we had this huge class, or large class should I rather say, and we had like 100 students, this wouldn't be an efficient way of doing stuff, because now we'd have to say int mark until mark 100, right? And then so now the concept of array came about. But now with arrays, what happens is that we've got this array of a certain length. For this instance, it would be an array of length 3, because we want to store the marks for 3 students. But with an array, we start accessing the first element of an array from 0, and then the last element of that array will be the length of the array minus 1. So if we've got the length of the array is 3, so then the last element will be 3 minus 1, which now is 2, right? So that's for the last element. And then so now for the first, we'll have the first element is 0. So now let's just go about how do you declare this array. So if you want to declare an array, you'd have an array, you do those square brackets to indicate that this is an array, and then we'll have this variable name, which is now arrays, which is marks. And then you would want to allocate memory to this array with this new keyword to allocate memory, and have 3, which is now the length of this array. So if we want to store the marks for student 1, would say element 0, because this is the starting element of this array, and then we'll have 32, and then we'd have marks, and then element 1, which is now the second element, and then we'll have 2, right, which is now the third student's mark, which is 50 marks. Okay, so that's how you do it. Say now we want to just print out these marks, so we'd have marks, right, for element 0, and then we want to concatenate that, and then we'd have another marks for element 1, which is for the second student, and then we're going to concatenate that, and then we'd have the marks for the third student. And then if we want to do the printout and run this program, you'd see that we've got 32, 40, 50. We got that printed out. But now say that we wanted to store another mark for the fourth student, right? And then we had 3, and then we said the student got 32, right? We would encounter an error, which is now the array index out of bound exception, meaning that this is an error. So reason being is that we're now trying to access an element which is now outside the array, because now we said we're starting from 0, so now the count would be 0, which is the first, second, third. So now if we try to access element 3, although the length of this array is 3, but now element 3 is now outside the bounds of this array, because now this is like the 4th element in this array and we can't access that, right? So now if we just want to check out, okay, if we want to solve this, we would want to then increase that length of that array, and then if we want to then print out that array, we'll now have mark plus, and then this is marks, and then this is element 3 of this array, and then we'll have that 32 in that array. So if we just want to print out the length of this array, what we can do is that we can just have this marks dot length, right? This will then print out the length of this array. So in this instance it's 4, right? That's the length of this array. That's how we do a printout of the length of the array. So now say that we want to have this array, but now just with static variables already initialized in this array. We can have something like this, an array with that, then have mark, let's just say marks or s, this is the name of the array, and then I would want to store 32, would separate them with comma, and then 40 comma, and then 50 comma, and then 32, and then we'd close with those curly braces, right? So now in this instance, if we wanted to do a print out, we'd say marks and then underscore s, and then if we wanted to access the first element of that array, we'd do that, and that would print out 32. If we wanted to access the second element of the array, do a printout, that's 40, so on, so on, so on, so on. So now, then the next thing is that we would want to write a program that will store the marks of n amount of students, right? Because now we wouldn't want to just hard code everything, like saying that mark 0, mark 1, marks 2, and so on, so on. So what we would want to do is have this program that will ask us like question like please enter the mark for student 1, please enter the mark for student 2, please enter the mark for student 3, and so on, depending on how many students do we have in this array. So what we would do here is just clear that until there, right? So we know that our program will want to have something that will prompt something on the screen, and then we'll have an input in that program. So we'd want to create a scanner, which is scan, which equals to new scanner, right? So new scanner, which is the new scanner, and then we'd want to import this from this java.util, right? And then this scanner will take a system.in, because we were going to take input from the scanner, right? And then we'll have an array. So this is an array of marks, right? It's an array of marks, and then which now equals to now. Because when it starts off, we don't know how many students are in this class, because we want to write a program so that when we give it to another teacher, they can store marks for students n amount of students in their class, right? So now what we'll have is that we'll have like a system out that will ask us that please enter that will ask how many students are in your class, right? And then now they'll scan, say that we'll just create a program that will not have any num marks, right? Or num students, and then this will say from the scanner dot next in next line. Like to first start it like that, next line, and then I'll just want to convert this into an integer, pass int scan that, right? Then this would say that we've got like so many students in our class. So for instance, if we run this program and say how many students are in your class, we can just say 10, and then that will store 10 in this variable. So now we'd want to have like allocate memory to this marks array, right? So we'd allocate this by saying marks, the length of this marks will be now equals to new int, And then we would want to say the length of this array is for students, because now we would have like 10 students if they enter 10 for that class, right? And then now what would happen is that we'd also want to have a for loop, which will loop through each element as the teacher enters a mark for each student, right? And then we'd have a loop of for int I equals to 0, because it starts off at 0, and then I, when I is less than the marks array dot length, because we want it to be while it's less than 10, and then just keep on recording those marks, right? And then we would have this curly braces, right? So now we'd want to then have marks for element I, because it's starting off at 0, 1, 2, 3, and then this will be incrementing as the for loop goes, right? And then this will be what we want to access is the scanner dot next line. Now let me just say next line, and then I would want to have an integer dot parse int, right? Have that in there. Just scan dot next line integer dot parse, and then I just want to trim that for just safety reasons, and then just close that, right? So say that we okay, we'd want to have like maybe a prompt down here. So let me just stop that program first to cancel that, and then we'd want to have maybe a system out that will constantly ask us system dot out dot print line, right? So that will have that. So enter the mark for student, and then we'd want to say enter the mark for student. If we want to start from 1, we'll then have to say I plus 1, because now it's starting off from 0, so we don't want to say enter the mark for student 0. We want to say enter the mark for student 1, enter the mark for student 2. So when it's 0, it says plus 1, which is 1. When it's 1, it would say plus 1, which is then student 2. So on. So if you run this program, it would say how many students are in your class. Say that we've got 5 students, and then now this would say enter the mark for student 1, 32, enter the mark for student 2, 42, enter the mark for student 3, this is 30, enter the mark for student 4, 50, and then enter the mark for student 5, this is 33, right? And then our program just ends. In case you're wondering, then okay, we haven't actually printed out their marks for these students, right? So what we want to do when we want to print out the marks for these students, since we've now had these students marked into this array, so what we want to do is system out for printing out each mark for these students, right? So what we want to do is now system out, right? And then you say mark for student plus, and then we would say I plus 1, right? And then we would want to have that mark, and then we would want to print out this mark for student I plus 1. Then we'll have marks, which is now I, because now this is starting off from 0 till the marks length, right? And then if we start off the program again, we'll have like how many students are in your class? 5, 32, 40, 50, 33, and then 21. So this will now say that the mark for student 1 is 32, the mark for student 2 is 40, the mark for student for student 3 is 50, the mark for student 33 is 21.
I just solved it! Yes! Woo! Okay, now my life has no purpose.
Solved. So we had a solution for that. We solved that. So in this instance, now you can have this program saying that another teacher can just state that I've got 10 students, then it will constantly ask them or prompt them to enter a mark for student whatnot, enter a mark for the next student, enter a mark for the other student until the length minus 1. So we have that solved. So if already you gained like some knowledge from that, I can give you like a challenge to solve, which is then probably accessing the student with the maximum mark, and then just state that student one has the highest mark. Yeah, just have the maximum mark. So max mark. So your output should say that student one or student two has the highest mark. Just write that program from what you have. So that's just the next challenge. So with that being said, please don't forget to thanks a lot and catch me on the next video. Peace.